money listening squirrels. Blow your ears out. Oh, I forgot to cut my lights on, but I think I'll just leave them off because maybe then I'll still have battery for tomorrow's live. Live at 5. Okay, we are still in chapter, whatever it said on the title, I think 12. They were the people who were there when your husband was painting the house? Yes, I think so. Part of the time anyway. They only came down weekends. Then there was some kind of a bust-up. They had a row, I think, or he went away and left her, or she went away and left him. I wasn't down there myself. I was working in Coventry, then doing a group. After that, I think there was just a governess in the house and the child. I don't know who the child was or where she came from, but I suppose the governess was looking after her. Then I think something happened to the child. Either the governess took her away somewhere or perhaps she died. What do you want to know about the people who lived in the house 20 years ago? Seems to me idiotic. I want to hear anything I can about that house, said Tommy. You see, my wife went away to look for that house. She said she'd seen it out of a train window somewhere. Quite right, said Mrs. Boscawen. The railway line runs just the other side of the bridge. You can see the house very well from it, I expect. My foot. Then she said, why did she want to find that house? Tommy gave a much abridged explanation. She looked at him doubtfully. You haven't come out of a mental home or anything, have you? Said Mrs. Boscawen. On parole or something, whatever they call it. I suppose I must sound a little like that, said Tommy, but it's quite simple, really. My wife wanted to find out about this house, and so she tried to take various train journeys to find out where it was she'd seen it. Well, I think she did find out. I think she went there to this place, something Chancellor? Sutton Chancellor, yes. Very one-horse place it used to be. Of course, it may be a big development or even one of these new dormitory towns by now. It might be anything, I expect, said Tommy. She telephoned she was coming back, but she didn't come back, and I want to know what's happened to her. I think she went and started investigating that house, and perhaps she ran into danger. What's dangerous about it? I don't know, said Tommy. Neither of us knew. I didn't even think there could be any danger about it, but my wife did. ESP? Possibly. She's a little like that. She has hunches. You never heard of or knew of Mrs. Lancaster 20 years ago or any time up to a month ago? Mrs. Lancaster? No. I don't think so. Sort of a name one might remember, mightn't it be? No, what about Mrs. Lancaster? She was the woman who owned this picture. She gave it as a friendly gesture to an aunt of mine. Then she left an old people's home rather suddenly. Her relatives took her away. I've tried to trace her, but it isn't easy. Who's the one who's got the imagination, you or your wife? You seem to have thought up a lot of things and to be rather in a state, if I may say so. Oh, yes, you can say so, said Tommy. Rather in a state. And all about nothing at all. That's what you mean, isn't it? I suppose you're right, too. No, said Mrs. Boscawen. Her voice had altered slightly. I wouldn't say about nothing at all. Tommy looked at her inquiringly. There's one thing that's odd about that picture, said Mrs. Boscawen. Very odd. I remember it quite well, you know. I remember most of William's pictures, although he painted such a lot of them. Do you remember who it was sold to, if it was sold? No, I don't remember that. Yes, I think it was sold. There was a whole batch of his paintings sold from one of his exhibitions. They ran back for about 3 or 4 years before this, and a couple of years later than this, quite a lot of them were sold, nearly all of them. But I can't remember by now who it was sold to. That's asking too much. I'm very grateful to you for all you have remembered. You haven't asked me yet why I said there was something odd about the picture, this picture that you brought here. You mean it isn't your husband's? Somebody else painted it? Oh, no. That's the picture that William painted, House by a Canal, I think it was called in the catalog, but it isn't as it was. You see, there's something wrong with it. What's wrong with it? Mrs. Boscawen stretched out a clay-smeared finger and jabbed at a spot just below the bridge spanning the canal. There, she said. You see, there's a boat tied up under the bridge, isn't there? Yes, said Tommy, puzzled. Well, that boat wasn't there. Not when I saw it last. William never painted that boat. When it was exhibited, there was no boat of any kind. You mean that somebody, not your husband, painted the boat in here afterwards? Yes, odd, isn't it? I wonder why. First of all, I was surprised to see the boat there, a place where there wasn't any boat. Then I could see quite well that it wasn't painted by William. He didn't put it in at any time. Somebody else did. I wonder who. She looked at Tommy, and I wonder why. Tommy had no solution to offer. He looked at Mrs. Boscawen. His Aunt Ada would have called her a scatty woman, but Tommy did not think of her in that light. She was vague, with an abrupt way of jumping from one subject to another. The things she said seemed to have very little relation to the last thing she said a minute before. Sounds like me. Squirrely. She was the sort of person, Tommy thought, who might know a great deal more than she chose to reveal. Had she loved her husband, or been jealous of her husband, or despised her husband? There was really no clue whatever in her manner, or indeed her words, but he had the feeling that that small painted boat, tied up under the bridge, had caused her uneasiness. She hadn't liked the boat being there. Suddenly, he wondered if the statement she had made was true. Could she really remember, from long years back, whether Boscawen had painted a boat at the bridge or had not? It seemed really a very small and insignificant item if it had been only a year ago when she had seen the picture last, but apparently it was a much longer time than that, and it had made her uneasy. He looked at her again and saw that she was looking at him, her curious eyes resting on him, not defiantly, but only thoughtfully, very, very thoughtfully. "What are you going to do now?" she said. That at least was easy. Tommy had no difficulty in knowing what he was going to do now. "I shall go home tonight, see if there is any news of my wife, any word from her. If not, tomorrow I shall go to this place," he said, "Sutton Chancellor. I hope that I may find my wife there." "It would depend," said Mrs. Boscawen. "Depend on what?" said Tommy sharply. Mrs. Boscawen frowned. Then she murmured, seemingly to herself, "I wonder where she is." "You wonder where who is?" Mrs. Boscawen had turned her glance away from him. Now her eyes swept back. "Oh," she said, "I meant your wife." Then she said, "I hope she's all right." "Why shouldn't she be all right? Tell me, Mrs. Boscawen, is there something wrong with that place, with Sutton Chancellor?" "With Sutton Chancellor? With the place?" She reflected. "No, I don't think so. Not with the place." "Well, I suppose I meant the house," said Tommy. "This house by the canal, not Sutton Chancellor Village." "Oh, the house," said Mrs. Boscawen. "It was a good house, really, meant for lovers, you know." "Did lovers live there?" "Sometimes. Not often enough, really. If a house is built for lovers, it ought to be lived in by lovers." not put to some other use by someone. You're pretty quick, said Mrs. Boscawen. You saw what I meant, didn't you? You mustn't put a house that was meant for one thing to the wrong use. It won't like it if you do. Do you know anything about the people who had lived there of late years? She shook her head. No, I don't know anything about the house at all. It was never important to me, you see. But you're thinking of something. No, someone? Yes, said Mrs. Boscawen. I suppose you're right about that. I was thinking of someone. Can't you tell me about the person you were thinking of? There's really nothing to say, said Mrs. Boscawen. Sometimes, one just wonders where a person is, what's happened to them, or how they might have developed. There's a sort of feeling. She waved her hands. Would you like a kipper? She said unexpectedly. A kipper? Tommy was startled. Well, I happen to have 2 or 3 kippers here. I thought perhaps you ought to have something to eat before you catch a train. Waterloo is the station, she said, for Sutton Chancellor, I mean. You used to have to change at Market Basing. I expect you still do. It was a dismissal. He accepted it. And that's the end of Chapter 12, finally. 3 parts. Chapter 12 in 3 parts. And I got the crud. I'm sorry. Chapter 13. Albert on clues. Tuppence blinked her eyes. Vision seemed rather dim. Hadn't heard from her since she got whacked over the head. She tried to lift her head from the pillow, but winced as a sharp pain ran through it and let it drop again onto the pillow. She closed her eyes. Presently she opened them again and blinked once more. With a feeling of achievement, she recognized her surroundings. I'm in a hospital ward, thought Tuppence. Satisfied with her mental progress so far, she attempted no more brainy deduction. She was in a hospital ward and her head ached. Why it ached, why she was in a hospital ward, she was not quite sure. Accident? Thought Tuppence. There were nurses moving around beds. That seemed natural enough. She closed her eyes and tried a little cautious thought. A faint vision of an elderly figure in clerical dress passed across a mental screen. Father? Said Tuppence doubtfully. Is it Father? She couldn't really remember. She supposed so. But what am I doing being ill in a hospital, thought Tuppence. I mean, a nurse in a hospital, so I ought to be in a uniform, VAD uniform. Oh dear, said Tuppence. Presently a nurse materialized near her bed. Feeling better now, dear? Said the nurse with a kind of false cheerfulness. That's nice, isn't it? Tuppence wasn't quite sure whether it was nice. The nurse said something about a nice cup of tea. I seem to be a patient, said Tuppence rather disapprovingly to herself. She lay still, resurrecting in her own mind various detached thoughts and words. Soldiers, said Tuppence. VADs, that's it, of course. I'm a VAD. The nurse brought her some tea in a kind of feeding cup and supported her whilst she sipped it. The pain went through her head again. A VAD, that's what I am, said Tuppence aloud. The nurse looked at her in an uncomprehending fashion. My head hurts, said Tuppence, adding a statement of fact. It'll be better soon, said the nurse. She removed the feeding cup, reporting to a sister as she passed along. Number 14's awake. She's a bit wonky, though, I think. Did she say anything? Said she was a VIP, said the nurse. The ward sister gave a small snort, indicating that was how she felt towards unimportant patients who reported themselves to be VIPs. We shall see about that, said the sister. Hurry up, nurse. Don't be all day with that feeding cup. Tuppence remained half drowsy on her pillows. She had not yet got beyond the stage of allowing thoughts to flit through her mind in a rather disorganized procession. There was somebody who ought to be here, she felt, somebody she knew quite well. There was something very strange about this hospital. It wasn't the hospital she remembered. It wasn't the one she had nursed in. All soldiers, that was, said Tuppence to herself. The surgical ward, I was on A and B rows. She opened her eyelids and took another look around. She decided it was a hospital she had never seen before and that it had nothing to do with the nursing of surgical cases, military or otherwise. I wonder where this is, said Tuppence. What place? She tried to think of the name of some place. The only places she could think of were London and Southampton. The ward sister now made her appearance at the bedside. Feeling a bit better, I hope, she said. I'm all right, said Tuppence. What's the matter with me? You hurt your head. I expect you find it rather painful, don't you? It aches, said Tuppence. Where am I? Market Basing Royal Hospital. Tuppence considered this information. It meant nothing to her at all. An old clergyman, she said. I beg your pardon? Nothing particular. We haven't been able to write your name on your diet sheet yet, said the ward sister. She held her biro, B-I-R-O, capital B, pen at the ready and looked inquiringly at Tuppence. My name? Yes, said the sister, for the records, she added helpfully. Tuppence was silent. Oh, Lord. She has amnesia, maybe. Her name. What was her name? How silly, said Tuppence to herself. I seem to have forgotten it. And yet I must have a name. Suddenly a faint feeling of relief came to her. The elderly clergyman's face flashed suddenly across her mind, and she said with decision, of course, Prudence. Prudence? That's right, said Tuppence. That's your Christian name? The surname. Cowley, C-O-W-L-E-Y. Glad to get that straight, said the sister, and moved away again with the air of one whose records are no longer worrying her. Excuse me. Tuppence felt faintly pleased with herself. Prudence Cowley. Prudence Cowley in the VAD, and her father was a clergyman at something vicarage, and it was wartime, and funny, said Tuppence to herself. I seem to be getting this all wrong. It seems to me it all happened a long time ago. She murmured to herself, was it your poor child? She wondered, was it she who had just said that, or was it somebody else said it to her? The sister was back again. Your address, she said, Miss Cowley, or is it Mrs. Cowley? Did you ask about a child? Was it your poor child? Did somebody say that to me, or am I saying it to them? I think I should sleep a little if I were you now, dear, said the sister. She went away and took the information she had obtained to the proper place. It seems to have come over... She seems to have come to herself, doctor, she remarked, and she says her name is Prudence Cowley, but she doesn't seem to remember her address. She said something about a child. Oh, well, said the doctor with his usual casual air, we'll give her another 24 hours or so. She's coming round from the concussion quite nicely. Part 2. Tommy fumbled with his latchkey. Before he could use it, the door came open and Albert stood in the open aperture. Well, said Tommy, is she back? Albert slowly shook his head. No word from her. No telephone message, no letters waiting, no telegrams. Oh, that's Tommy asking. No telegrams? And all that other stuff. Nothing, I tell you, sir, nothing whatever, and nothing from anyone else either. They're lying low, but they've got her. That's what I think, they've got her. What the devil do you mean they've got her, said Tommy. The things you read. Who's got her? Well, you know what I mean, the gang. What gang? One of those gangs with flick knives, maybe, or an international one. Stop talking rubbish, said Tommy. Do you know what I think? Albert looked inquiringly at him. I think it's extremely inconsiderate of her not to send us word of some kind, said Tommy. Oh, said Albert. Well, I see what you mean. I suppose you could put it that way if it makes you happier, he added rather unfortunately. He removed the parcel from Tommy's arms. I see you brought that picture back, he said. Yes, I brought the bloody picture back, said Tommy. A fat lot of use it's been. You haven't learned anything from it? Well, that's not quite true, said Tommy. I have learned something from it, but whether what I've learned is going to be of any use to me, I don't know. He added, Dr. Murray didn't ring up, I suppose, or Miss Packard from Sunny Ridge Nursing Home? Nothing like that? Nobody's rung up except the greengrocer. He says he's got some nice aubergines. He knows the missus is fond of aubergines. He always lets her know, but I told him she wasn't available just now. He added, I've got a chicken for your dinner. Lord, they always have chicken. It's extraordinary that you can never think of anything but chicken, said Tommy unkindly. It's what they call a poutine this time, said Albert. Skinny, he added. A poutine. P-O-U-S-S-I-N. I probably mispronounced that. It'll do, said Tommy. The telephone rang. Tommy was out of his seat and rushed to it in a moment. Hello, hello? A faint and faraway voice spoke. Mr. Thomas Beersford, can you accept a personal call from Invergashley? Yes. Hold the line, please. Tommy waited. His excitement was calming down. He had to wait some time. Then a voice he knew, crisp and capable, sounded. The voice of his daughter. Hello, is that you, Pop? Deborah! Yes. Why are you sounding so breathless? Have you been running? Daughters, Tommy thought, were always critical. I wheeze a bit in my old age, he said. How are you, Deborah? Oh, I'm all right. Look here, Dad, I saw something in the paper. Perhaps you've seen it too. I wondered about it. Something about someone who'd had an accident and was in hospital. Well, I don't think I saw anything of that kind. I mean, not to notice it anyway. Why? Well, it didn't sound too bad. I supposed it was a car accident or something like that. It mentioned that the woman, whoever it was, an elderly woman, gave her name as Prudence Cowley, but they were unable to find her address. Prudence Cowley, you mean? Well, yes, I only wondered. That is Mother's name, isn't it? I mean, it was her name? Of course. I always forget about the Prudence. I mean, we've never thought of her as Prudence, you and I, or Derek either. No, said Tommy. No, it's not the kind of Christian name one would associate much with your mother. No, I know it isn't. I just thought it was rather odd. You don't think it might be some relation of hers? I suppose it might be. Where was this? Hospital at Market Basing, I think it said. They wanted to know more about her, I gather. I just wondered, well, I know it's awfully silly. There must be quantities of people called Cowley and quantities of people called Prudence, but I just thought I'd ring up and find out, make sure, I mean, that Mother is at home and all right and all that. I see, said Tommy. Yes, I see. Well, go on, Pop. Is she home? No, said Tommy, she isn't at home, and I don't know either whether she's all right or not. What do you mean? Said Deborah. What's Mother been doing? I suppose you've been up in London with that hush-hush, utterly secret, idiotic survival from past days, jawing with all the old boys. Jawing? You're quite right, said Tommy. I got back from that yesterday evening. And you found Mother away, or did you know she was away? Come on, Pop, tell me about it. You're worried. I know when you're worried well enough. What's Mother been doing? She's been up to something, hasn't she? I wish at her age she'd learn to sit quiet, not do things. She's been worried, said Tommy. Worried about something that happened in connection with your great Aunt Ada's death. What sort of thing? Well, something that one of the patients at the nursing home said to her. She got worried about this old lady. She started talking a good deal, and your mother was worried about some of the things she said, and so when we went to look through Aunt Ada's things, we suggested talking to this old lady, and it seems she's left rather suddenly. Well, that seems quite natural, doesn't it? Some of her relatives came and fetched her away. It still seems quite natural, said Deborah. Why did Mother get the wind up? She got it in her head, said Tommy, that something might have happened to this old lady. I see. Not to put too fine a point on it, as the saying goes, she seems to have disappeared. All in quite a natural way, I mean. Vouched for by lawyers and banks and all that. Only we haven't been able to find out where she is. Why do they think that's her in the hospital? It's her doggone name. You mean Mother's gone off to look for her somewhere? Yes, and she didn't come back when she said she was coming back 2 days ago. And you haven't heard from her? No. I wish to goodness you could look after Mother properly, said Deborah severely. None of us have ever been able to look after her properly, said Tommy. Not you either, Deborah, if it comes to that. It's the same way she went off in the war and did a lot of things that she'd no business to be doing. But it's different now. I mean, she's quite old. She ought to sit at home and take care of herself. I suppose she's been getting bored. That's at the bottom of it all. Market Basing Hospital, did you say? Said Tommy. Melfordshire. It's about an hour or hour and a half from London, I think, by train. That's it, said Tommy, and there's a village near Market Basing called Sutton Chancellor. What's that got to do with it? Said Deborah. It's too long to go into now, said Tommy. It has to do with a picture painted of a house near a bridge by a canal. I don't think I can hear you very well, said Deborah. What are you talking about? Never mind, said Tommy. I'm going to ring up Market Basing Hospital and find out a few things. I've a feeling that it's your mother, all right. Duh. People, if they've had a concussion, often remember things first that happened when they were a child and only get slowly to the present. She's gone back to her maiden name. She may have been in a car accident, but I shouldn't be surprised if somebody had given her a conk on the head. It's the sort of thing that happens to your mother. She gets into things. I'll let you know what I find out. 40 minutes later, Tommy Beersford glanced at his wristwatch and breathed a sigh of utter weariness as he replaced the receiver with a final clang on the telephone rest. Albert made an appearance. What about your dinner, sir? He demanded. You haven't eaten a thing, and I'm sorry to say I forgot about the chicken, burnt to a cinder. I don't want anything to eat, said Tommy. What I want is a drink. Bring me a double whiskey. Coming, sir, said Albert. A few moments later, he brought the required refreshment to where Tommy had slumped down in the worn but comfortable chair reserved for his special use. And now, I suppose, said Tommy, you want to hear everything? Matter of fact, sir, said Albert in a slightly apologetic tone, I know most of it. You see, seeing as it was a question of the missus and all that, I took the liberty of lifting up the extension in the bedroom. I didn't think you'd mind, sir, not as it was the missus. I don't blame you, said Tommy. Actually, I'm grateful to you. If I had to start explaining... Got on to everyone, didn't you? The hospital, the doctor, and the matron. No need to go over it all again, said Tommy. Market Basing Hospital, said Albert. Never breathed a word of that, she didn't. Never left it behind as an address or anything like that. She didn't intend it to be her address, said Tommy. As far as I could make out, she was probably coshed on the head in an out-of-the-way spot somewhere. Someone took her along in a car and dumped her at the side of the road somewhere to be picked up as an ordinary hit and run, he added. Call me at 6:30 tomorrow morning. I want to get an early start. Excuse me. Everything itches. I'm picking my nose, messing with my eyeballs. Sorry. Early start. I'm sorry about your chicken getting burnt up again in the oven. I only put it in to keep it warm and forgot about it. Never mind chickens, said Tommy. I've always thought they were very silly birds running under cars and clucking about. Bury the corpse tomorrow morning and give it a good funeral. She's not at death's door or anything, is she, sir? Asked Albert. Subdue your melodramatic fancy, said Tommy. If you'd done any proper listening, you'd have heard that she's come nicely to herself again. Knows who she is, or was, and where she is, and they've sworn to keep her there waiting for me until I arrive to take charge of her again. On no account is she to be allowed to slip out by herself and go off again doing some more tomfool detective work. Speaking of detective work, said Albert, and hesitated with a slight cough. I don't particularly want to talk about it, said Tommy. Forget it, Albert. Teach yourself bookkeeping or window box gardening or something. Well, I was just thinking, as a matter of clues. What about clues? I've been thinking. That's where all the trouble in life comes from, thinking. Clues, said Albert again. That picture, for instance. That's a clue, isn't it? Tommy observed that Albert had hung the picture of the house by the canoe up on the wall. If that picture's a clue to something, what do you think it's a clue to? He blushed slightly at the elegancy of the phrase he had just coined. What's it all about? It ought to mean something. What I was thinking of, said Albert, if you'll excuse me mentioning it. Go ahead, Albert. What I was thinking of was that desk. Desk? Yes, the one that came by the furniture removers with the little table and the 2 chairs. And the other things, family property it was, you said? It belonged to my Aunt Ada, said Tommy. Well, that's what I meant, sir. That's the sort of place where you find clues. An old desk, antiques. Possibly, said Tommy. It wasn't my business, I know, and I suppose I really oughtn't to have gone messing about with it, but while you were away, sir, I couldn't help it. I had to go and have a look. What? A look into the desk? Yes, just to see if there might be a clue there. You see, desks like that, they have secret drawers. Possibly, said Tommy. Well, there you are. There might be a clue there hidden, shut up in a secret drawer. It's an agreeable idea, said Tommy, but there's no reason, as far as I know, for my Aunt Ada to hide things away in secret drawers. Whew, and I'm going to stop there. And we'll hopefully read some more tomorrow. Yay for Friday mornings. I'll be so happy when my girl Crystal from the Secret Yarnery comes on. I have not touched this hat. I'm going to restart the whole ding-dong thing over. So, let y'all go and put Crystal on. Love y'all. Be sweet, don't be ugly.